Thank you. My name's Tim. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you for being here today. As usual, if anything I say is helpful, marvelous. If it's not, don't worry about it. I may change my mind later today on anything that I say, and everything I say I've got from someone else. All I do is collate this material and spew it out. So tradition 12, we've got, as usual, a short form and a long form. Short form. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. Normally when I hear that, that's my cue to come back into the room after I've been in blackout for about 2 minutes. It's like the ABCs, God could and would if he was sought, prompts me, back in the room. Long form. And finally, we of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the principle of anonymity has an immense spiritual significance. It reminds us that we are to place principles before personalities, that we are actually to practice a genuine humility. This to the end that our great blessings may never spoil us, that we shall forever live in thankful contemplation of Him who presides over us all. Now, tradition 12 is different than the other traditions. I can't remember where it's stated, but it's stated somewhere that the two main purposes of the traditions are to cover how a group runs and to cover our public relations. Whereas this one doesn't do either of those things. It sets out a much more abstract principle which feeds into all of the other traditions. And there are three key ideas, I think, in this. Is anonymity, there's principles before personalities, and there's humility. And I'm going to cover personality first. And I think this is the key to the whole thing. Just a couple of things I've heard in AA about personality. The first one is about coming to AA full of personality but with no character. No actual virtues with which I'm capable of building anything, but there's a bit of pizzazz there maybe. Bill C talks about collapsing at 9 years sober, collapsing under the weight of his own personality, which I identify with. So I think it's a very good line. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, personality is the combination of characteristics or qualities that form an individual's distinctive character. So my personality, and here's the curious thing, personality is what therefore separates me from other people. It is what makes me distinctive. Anything which is the same as, I've got a spleen and everyone else has got a spleen. And so that doesn't distinguish me in any way. I've got 4 fingers and a thumb on each hand. That's not. Whereas if there's anything different, well, that's how you recognize people, is by what's different about them, not by what's the same. So personalities is what separates me from other people. And there's a problem here. I don't know if any of you have read A New Pair of Glasses by Chuck Chamberlain. Or rather, it's not really by him. It's, I believe, a transcript of his talks. But in there's the famous Chuck Chamberlain image of a circle. And the circle is life and good and God and the universe and everything in it, including humanity. And then there's a line. And then on the other side of the line is Chuck on his own, separate from life and good and God and the universe and humanity. And the line is the feeling of conscious separation from. And I don't know if you've ever gone into a room and instantly, subconsciously, or below the level of consciousness, made a list of all the ways in which you're different to everyone else in the room, rather than all the ways in which you're the same. They say in many meetings, look for the similarities, not for the differences. So there's a difficulty with personality. It's, so far doesn't look like a very good thing. But rightly or wrongly, wisely or foolishly, I operate under the principle, if it exists, it must exist for a reason. Um, and there's a line in one of the stories in the back of the big book. It used to be Dr. Alcoholic Addict. Um, Now it's called Acceptance is the Answer. And there's a line in there which causes an awful lot of controversy in AA. And the line is something to the effect that nothing happens in this world by mistake. Um, uh, and one way of understanding that, might say my brother died of alcoholism. One way of understanding that is to say God was sitting there one day and said, "I know what should we do today? I know we'll kill him. Right, going to press the button. Ah, 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 ah." And God is a sort of awful person just sort of knocking over chess pieces, and that's one view, and it's a view that some people hold. It's the basis for whole branches of certain religions. Let's not name them, but it's there. There are people that actually believe that. And God is sort of sniggering to himself about the suffering that is caused. Another way of reading that, nothing happens by mistake, is, well, the reason why my brother died of alcoholism. Well, there are many reasons, but they're there. You can trace chains of causality which resulted in him dying of alcoholism. Some of those causes are within him, some of those causes are outside of him. But it's not happening for no reason. So, it's an interesting question. Do things happen uh, for a reason? Well, there is always a cause. Nothing is without cause. If you know anything about physics, even in chaos theory, everything is determined, even if it can't be predicted. And that's a fascinating idea from physics, or physics stroke maths, that even in apparently chaotic systems, there are causal chains, but it's impossible to predict can be impossible to predict how they're going to operate. So it gives the appearance of chaos, but it isn't really chaos in the true sense of true randomness. So anyway, I just said that as an aside. The point here is if something exists, there's a reason for it existing. A third way of understanding that there is a reason for something existing is the notion of divine economy, which is God can make something of anything. So terrible things happen in the world, and you pray to God, and something good is made of it. And this is I'm not making this up. This is from the big book, so it must be true. On page 124, where it says our dark past becomes our greatest asset. So good things can be made of bad things. It's another understanding of that nothing happens by mistake. So if personalities exist, there must be a reason for personalities to exist, otherwise they wouldn't exist, or at least you can make something of them. And one thing that I've noticed in the AA literature, it's in one of the prefaces or the forwards. It's in the preface or one of the forwards where it says, "We hope you will pause when reading one of the 42 stories and say, yes, that happened to me. Yes, I felt like that. Maybe this will work for me too," or something like that. Now, it's curious. Someone pointed this out to me many years ago. It doesn't say, "We hope you will pause when reading all 42 of the 42 stories." It says, "We hope you will pause when reading one of them," because it kind of knows you'll read 41 of the 42 and say, "Nothing to do with me," you know, "Not interested in this person," dull, dull, dull. And then one of them accidentally hits you between the eyes. So, similarly in meetings, I mean, I don't know why, I find it very difficult to concentrate in meetings. I mean, you go to them, don't you, because you're told to, but some people hang off every word, and like you hear people saying, "I identify with everyone in the room. I've loved everything that everyone has said." I haven't heard 1/10 of what has been said. So I'm not in a position to say whether I love everything that has been said. I'd have to have been there, but I wasn't. So I will identify with people most readily when they're like me. I mean, it's awful. It's probably narcissistic. But anyway, I identify most with people who are like me one way or another. It's on the level of person, and that's personality, those things which. So, my observation in my own case is that God reaches me most effectively through people with whom I have something in common. Now, it might be something external, it might be a quirk of personality, it may be a particular way of looking at things, it may be a particular experience. But the idea, I think, is that um, if God is this sort of unknowable cloud of eternal majesty, and then there's me, sitting in uh, a human body with all of my eccentricities and neuroses, there isn't really a very clear line of communication between that which created the universe and me sitting in my living room. And so God seems to use other people really readily to communicate with me. And a channel is needed, some kind of intermediary is needed between God and me. Because, like, the direct line of communication, I don't know about you, I dial in and I can't always get through. I get the answer machine a lot. So I think God reaches me through people. And so now, if everybody was the same, would God be able to reach me in the same way? Maybe not. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are meetings where people present as being all the same, but that's that's an entirely different question. Those meetings where if you swapped people's shares, you wouldn't know, no one would know, because everybody shares exactly the same things, same words, same phrases. I think it's at the end of chapter 2 in the big book, it talks about how it is only by disclosing ourselves fully uh, that people will be attracted to what we have. So we've got to, as the Germans would say, let the pig out. You've got to let the full glory of what we are out, in good and bad. And it talks also there about each person disclosing in his own voice and in his own way how he established a relationship with a power greater than himself. So all of this is personality. But what has happened in AA, identifying with people at that very personal level, it's like that's the entry point. And once I'm in, I can communicate with everyone. But if I'm in a separated state, I need a very, very human way in. And this is the magic of AA, is it provides both. It provides a very human way in to connect with people. Once you connect, when I'm feeling connected, I can identify with everyone in the room one way or another, but I need to get in first. So I think there's a purpose in personality. Now my problem, and I think this goes back to the core problem that I have, possibly that all people have. I'm a little wary of making very universal statements. In English, we've got the phrase "a self-made man," and in America, they don't say this in Britain, but they say it in America. Oh, so and so. Oh, he's worth $5 million. He is worth $10 million. And there's a phrase to make something of yourself in the language. And I was certainly brought up with the idea that you go through the world and you make something of yourself. You establish a career, you establish a position for yourself in society, you establish a reputation for yourself. What will the neighbours think was a very common question that was asked in my house. We can't have people around. What will they think? What will I give them to eat? We won't be able to give them anything good enough. Um, and I think that the core of my ego, that I think it's Eckhart Tolle who says that what is ego? It's false mind-made images of self. false mind-made images of self. And when I look at how I lived my life before I started using the Big Book as my guide to living within AA, it was all about arranging my external circumstances, career, relationship, friends, holidays, house, all the accoutrements, financial position, in order to establish an image of myself that I was comfortable with, that I could then take credit for and look good to everyone else. And the idea here is that it's as though I was creating myself, so I would take credit if what I'd created was good, and uh, uh, I would get the blame if something went wrong. So immensely tense the whole time. If anything would happen that would uh, potentially tarnish my image, so something would go wrong at work and the company wasn't going to do so well, and what would people think was basically the thought behind it. I didn't care about the company. I cared about how the company's financial well-being reflected on me as its financial director. That's what I cared about. And this is, ego, I think, is very similar to personality. There's a cigarette paper between the two. So principles before personalities. The problem with my personality, the problem with my ego, was that it got out of control. It became the sole purpose. It became the sole purpose of my life. I wasn't interested in God. I wasn't interested in serving other people. I was interested in shoring up my own self-image, my personality, my ego. And there's an idea that something that Bob Bazant says, which is very good, and Mildred Frank says it as well. I think she gets it from Bob, and then she propagates the idea. Is that the ego is like a space suit. That if you want to walk, if you want to be in space, you have to have a space suit. Otherwise, you'll freeze and explode, or whatever happens to you in space. So you can't take the trip without it. And if I'm going to be a human being, I can't take the trip without having an ego, without having a physical body, without having a material existence, without having a reputation, without having everything, without having personality quirks and traits and Asperger's and all sorts of. It's been suggested I have OCD by someone recently. I have no opinion on this outside issue. I just call it being really, really bloody tidy. That's what I call it. Um, and it's obviously God's will. So, uh, all of that stuff, if I'm on the planet, I'm gonna have that stuff. I'm gonna have, the personality, the quirks, the particular ways of doing things, the temperament, the tastes. Why do I like a Fiorentina more than a Four Seasons? I don't know. I just do. I'm built with these things. The problem is that my whole life was based on personalities before principles, or personalities instead of principles. So this personality, which apparently, maybe contentiously, I'm given in order to be part of doing God's will more effectively in the world, becomes the whole purpose of living. It's like it's detached from its original purpose. And when I'm in an ego state, so when I'm concerned with my material life, with how other people are behaving, my wants, my needs, my money, my self-image, my image of someone else, I don't know about you, every single time there is an underlying unease, a sense that there is something wrong with me that I'm trying to cover up. There is a sense that I've done all sorts of things wrong, even if I can't work out what they are. I kind of think I've done everything wrong. Plus, I'm superior, but I've done everything wrong. Now, if you take those two, like shame and guilt, shame is about what you are, guilt is about what you've done. Another word for shame is original sin, apparently. shame and guilt, you put shame and guilt together, if you're like me, you're going to get a lot of fear. Why? Because guilt is like guilt and sin and shame. In the culture, my perception is that those try to call for punishment and justice. You see people outside courthouses with these placards saying justice, which usually means punishment. We want someone to be punished. Unless someone's punished, there isn't justice. So justice is punishment. So good is punishment. Punishment is good. Whereas error calls for correction. So if you've got a kid, you're teaching the kid geometry and he gets something wrong, a good teacher will not hit the child. A good teacher will try to understand where the mistake has happened, correct the mistake in the child's understanding, and then the child will get the geometry right. So that's the difference between punishment and correction. And if I'm doing something incorrectly, let's say I'm wiring a plug and the light won't come on, I really, really want that to be corrected. Whereas punishment is not so attractive. So that's why I will naturally hide anything I feel guilty or ashamed about, because I'm frightened of punishment. So now we have this holy trifecta of shame and guilt and fear. And then the ego comes in and says, we'll fix that. And you find all the reasons why everybody else is wrong, so that when the bony finger of judgment comes down from the heavens, it will point at someone else, not at me. I try to compensate by building my fortresses in various ways. But the question is, where does that original sense of guilt and shame come from? And my feeling, my instinct, and this idea has been suggested to me, I didn't make this idea up. Whoever I'm meant to be on the planet, I don't know about you, when I am working with another alcoholic and it's going really well and I'm really connected, I feel great. Like there's nothing wrong with me, there's nothing wrong with you, I don't care what else is happening, I'm fine, I'm in the moment, life is good. I'm buzzing a few feet above the ground. And in fact, Anthony de Mello talks about this, when you're super absorbed in an activity, whether it's playing the piano or painting or just going for a walk, when you're totally in the moment and totally absorbed, there's no sense there's anything wrong with me. There's no sense there's anything wrong with everyone else. Everything's fine. So when I'm in the groove of doing God's will, I'm fine. If I divert from that, there is and move into the zone where I'm responsible for creating myself and I become self-aware, self-conscious, I'm betraying who I really am. And I think that's where the sense of guilt and shame comes from. It's like I've literally killed who I really am to become the thing that I'm trying to create in the world as the substitute, which is my personality. And that explanation makes a huge amount of sense. You see, if the universe created me, or the higher power created me, or God created me, and I'm saying, no, 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 I created me, I'm denying my own creator. And if you think about when parents say to children and children say to parents, when parents say to children, you're no son of mine. When children say to parents, you're no mother of mine, how devastating that is. And I've been in that conversation and I've seen that conversation in my life. It's devastating in either direction. But whenever I try to create a personality for myself in the world and then believe I am that, I'm literally denying the universe which gave me life. So no wonder I feel guilty and ashamed. It's like it's been in deleting it from my consciousness. It's like I've destroyed it. Guilt, shame. when I'm reconnected with it, I realize that whole thing was a dream. That whole thing was a mistake. How could I have been so silly? And you don't need to wait till you're 20 or 20 years sober. If you've ever seen a newcomer sit in a meeting and laugh and be like totally fine after the meeting, and yet they still have the shakes from drinking a couple of weeks ago, the nervous system hasn't settled down, but they're fine because they're connected. If someone who's 2 weeks sober can be connected, anyone can be connected. So principles before personalities. So it's so interesting to me. I find the traditions fascinating. It doesn't say principles instead of personalities. It says principles before personalities, which gives me room to be myself, which gives me room to be a human being, which gives me room to be a little peculiar. It gives me room to be myself. I don't have to be a porcelain doll where everything is just fine the whole time and my face never cracks. That's what Ken Wapnick, the Course in Miracles editor, would call being a bliss ninny. So like pretending everything is fine, pretending pretending that you have no personality left. This is not about getting rid of your personality. And sometimes people feel really guilty in AA for having a personality. I'll give you an example. I spoke at a meeting a few years ago where um, I probably went in with a bit of a swagger. I have the habit of having a swagger to me on a bad day. I don't know if I have one today. If I have, well, so be it. But whatever your personality is, like 1 in 7 people it's just going to make their skin crawl. Okay. So I was at this meeting and this poor woman in the front row was clearly having a really uncomfortable time listening to me. And she was first to share after I finished. And she said, I don't know if I could stay sober as long as you say you've been sober, being quite so cynical as you so self-evidently are. So obviously something did not work there. We haven't been for coffee. Let's just put it like that. The rest of the meeting was just glorious because basically the rest of the room was untreated Al-Anons. Everyone else felt guilty and embarrassed about what she had done. And so the rest of the meeting was people trying to make up for it with like weird sycophancy and apologies. And thank you for coming such a long way. It was 5 miles. Thank you for coming such a long way on a Thursday evening, Not like it's Christmas Eve or something. It was a Thursday evening. But anyway, uh, and I felt terrible for a while thinking, well, how can I stop getting reactions like that? I'm never going to stop getting reactions like that. It's okay to have a personality. It's okay that other people don't like me. If no one likes me, maybe I need to look at that. But as long as those reactions are reasonably isolated, it's fine. So it's okay to be myself. So the personality doesn't get eliminated; it gets harnessed to a higher purpose. Um, what else? What are these principles? If I'm not the personality, if the personality is is the spacesuit, if the personality is the housing that I have by being in the world, who am I really? Some ideas which I find really helpful. That we're spirit housed in a human body. That we have this illusion that we're all separate. Actually, we're all one. We're all a single spirit, which is looking out through physical eyes and therefore thinking in each person that it's separate and different. And it's just a mistake. and that the job of being on the planet is to realize that's a mistake and that we're all one, and to help other people realize that too, which is the waking up. And waking up, spiritual awakening, step 12 and tradition 12, I think, is super linked. The waking up, um, okay, if you wake up, does that not imply that you've been asleep? So all of the character defects are not evil, they're just being asleep. Which can't, so if other people are behaving badly, they're not evil, they're asleep. Really helps with forgiveness, that. And this sense of connection, I don't think I'm happy unless I'm connected to other people and thereby I'm connected to God. There's a letter from Carl Jung to Bill Wilson from the 30th of January 1961, where they're talking about Roland Hazard. And they say his craving for alcohol was the equivalent on a low level of the spiritual thirst of our being for wholeness, expressed in medieval language, the union for God. So that's all I've ever wanted to do, really, is connect. I found pretty weird ways of connecting. My chief way of connecting with other people when I was drinking is to see almost all of humanity as despicable and disgusting, but find a couple of allies who would agree with me about quite how humanity was despicable and disgusting. And in our little fortress on the hill, me and my little allies would feel very connected with each other. It was finding connection in separation. I only really feel connected when, if anyone is excluded from my sense of connection, I'm entirely excluded. That's the weird thing. If I've got one resentment, or there is one bunch of people in the world who I want to exclude, I'm not excluding them, I'm excluding myself. So everybody's got to be, it's like an electrical circuit. You know those old-fashioned fairy lights from the 1970s where if one bulb went, the whole circuit went? It's like that. Some other ideas about, if I'm spirit, it means I've never been born. I'm never going to die. The human body is a temporary communication device. When your mobile phone, let's say you're talking to someone on the mobile phone and your mobile phone dies or their mobile phone dies, you don't think they've gone anywhere. It's just that line of communication has been cut. Anne Lamott memorably describes death as a fairly major change of address. A fairly major change of address. Um, and I'm not frightened of death. Um, I'm more frightened of Tuesday, actually, than I am of death. Not because there's anything particular happening on Tuesday, but it's just never the best day. Um, there's a spiritual book called the Tanya by Rabbi Zalman of Yadi, and in there he talks about souls are all one. Only the bodies divide us. And I don't know about you, but certainly in my younger years, I was a little bit of a naughty boy, and I was proceeding on the assumption that if you connect your body with someone else's, that you're connecting with the person somehow. So I would connect with other people's bodies a lot. Never worked. Um, it's only my mind, it's only my soul which actually really connects with other people. If anyone has seen the French film Amélie, um, she almost accidentally, she ends up through accident doing someone a good turn. And the moment after she's done it, she said, this is the quote, I transcribed the passage, and I've come from a French family, so I know the film very well. I've translated the passage in question from the film. Amelie suddenly has the strange feeling of being in total harmony with herself. Everything is perfect in this instant, the softness in the light, this slight fragrance in the air, the gentle hum of the city. She inhales deeply, and life then strikes her as being so simple and so clear that a wave of love and desire to help the whole of humanity suddenly submerges her. Isn't that great? Um, The French would come up with something like that. I'm amazing. I mean, you'd expect, but not the French, but they did. Um, uh, it's wonderful because I think it perfectly describes the spiritual awakening. It's what the purpose of the whole of the steps is to reconnect me with humanity and God by waking up and helping other people wake up. And if I can help someone move along the path towards waking up, that's good. Sometimes you lose sponsees and you think it never worked. Maybe you just got them, snakes and ladders. You got them from square two to square four. That was your job. Um, so that's the overall principle, I think, of recovery. The individual principles are the principles contained in the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, and the 12 concepts. On humility, the line that my sponsor quotes the whole time is, what is humility? The recognition of the allness of God and the nothingness of self. And it echoes the line in Bill's story where he says, of myself I was nothing. Another good definition of humility, it's not in my notes, but it's just occurred to me. So step 7 talks about humility, and it in the 12 and 12, but the definition of humility is in step 5 in the 12 and 12 from memory. And it says a sincere recognition of who and what we are, plus a sincere desire to become what we could be. And I think that's not bad. But the best one, there's a definition of pride from the St. Augustine prayer book, which I find enormously helpful. Pride is putting self in the place of God as the centre and objective of our life or of some department thereof. It is the refusal to recognise our status as creatures dependent on God for our existence and placed by him in a specific relationship to his creation. And the great thing is, and then from there, it lists all of the other character defects, but it sees pride as this positioning yourself at the center of the universe as opposed to God, as the source. And you flip it on its head and it becomes a very helpful definition of humility. So, there's no good saying to someone, oh, you need to be humble, Susan. Susan won't know what to do with that instruction. But this following definition of humility is something that you can actually apply, at 11 o'clock today. Humility is putting God in the place of self as the center and objective of our life or of some department thereof. It is the recognition of our status as creatures dependent on God for our existence and placed by him in a specific relationship to the rest of his creation. So how am I going to apply that today? So if God is the center and objective of my life, then the only thing that matters is doing God's will, which is the next indicated action. The outcomes of those actions, none of my business. If I get work today, none of my business. If my clients like me today, none of my business. What happens to my finances? None of these are any of my business. My only job is to do the next indicated action. It's something that I can meditate on. It's something I can work with. The word humility on its own, I can't do anything with. I need a definition to be able to work with it. That's why I find definitions helpful. So to me, the substance of tradition 12 is recognizing that that's the purpose. I don't have my own purpose in the world. I'm here to achieve God's purpose. There's some more points about anonymity. Have I got them on my? I don't seem to have them on my list. So I'm going to say something about anonymity. Oh no, I've got it here. So, what does anonymity mean in this context? To me, it means that if anything good is achieved in my life, I didn't do it. God did it through me. I simply turned up and made myself available to the material. That was all. So I don't get to take the credit for anything. And that's what the anonymity is. It's not having a name. It's literally what it means, not having a name. God is the one who has the name. I'm just here. Um, it talks as well in the long form about being spoiled by our blessings. And I was thinking, what are the three ways I've been spoiled by blessings? The first way is to take credit for them rather than giving the credit to God. So that echoes what I was saying about anonymity. The second one is getting distracted by the blessings and losing track of our purpose. And I think Bob D talks about this a lot, having all of the wonderful things that you get through recovery, taking you away from recovery and taking you away from the thing that gave you those things in the first place. And the catchphrase for this is letting the gifts separate us from the giver. If you've ever given a present to a child and seen it become totally absorbed in the present and with no cognizance that you've given it the present in the first place, like you're now invisible. All it can see is, either the toy or the box the toy came in, even more of an insult. And actually, I think that's a pretty good image. So if God gives me God gives me a career with external trappings, the real blessing there is the use of the career to connect with other human beings and be a channel for God. However, like the kid or like the cat, actually, if you've ever bought something for a cat which comes in the box, the cat is never interested in the thing that came in the box. It sits in the box like it's a palace. And that's exactly what I do. I would sit inside the cardboard box of a career, delighted with the cardboard box, but with no knowledge of what was even in the box. I don't care what's in the box. I just like the box. I'm 2-year old. That's how old I was when I was doing that. And again, forgetting that there was a giver behind it. So to sum up, I think there are 5 points I made here. The first one is that all good comes from God. It doesn't. So even if it comes from someone else, it's come from God via them. The principle I follow, this is really contentious because a lot of people are very invested in believing in the reality of evil in the world. I think if I had £1 for every time someone over the last year said, "Oh, the way things are in the world," followed by a great big sigh, the world is coming to an end, or everything's collapsing and everything's awful. Well, I don't believe that. Don't believe it for 1 minute. Everything is good or works to the good or can be worked to the good. It's the principle I live by. A phrase my sponsor uses is that we're the danced, not the dancer or the dance. We're the instrument with which the dance takes place. God works through us. God works through other people to reach me, and anything we achieve is God's achievement, not ours. I've got a few more minutes. I'm going to say some things about how I actually practically apply Tradition 12 in different domains. Sponsorship. I think there are lots of forms of service. Some are far less to my taste than others. I kind of hate doing public information. I can do it. I'm not bad at it, but I hate doing it. I like doing sponsorship. But if someone else has helped, I never take internally, I never take the credit. If someone has helped, they're helped through me, not by me. Which means if it doesn't seem to work, it's not my fault either. You see, if you start taking credit for someone getting well, you've got to take the blame if they don't. So there's a quid pro quo there. You can't have one. It's like going through life taking compliments, but then rejecting insults as if so, well, what do they know? But the they is the same people that were complimenting you a week ago. What? So when someone is complimenting you, they're right, and when they're not complimenting you, they're right. I'm deciding the truth here? No. The only way I found is to detach from the whole thing. Whenever I'm going on holiday, Remember holiday. I have no idea whether that will ever happen again, but whenever you're going on holiday, people always say, "Are you looking forward to it?" And no, I'm not. There's that whole system of looking forward to stuff. What? So I'm going to look forward to good things, but manage not to dread the bad things. Like there's no consistent principle there. The only way I found to work is to switch the whole module off. It's like that with compliments and praise and criticisms and insults. It's like that with looking into the future. It's like that looking into the past. So whatever is achieved through me. I'm not taking the credit. Um, what else in sponsorship? Um, yeah, it's about being detached. So all I have to do is make myself available. Either someone makes use of it or they don't. Um, and something I've had to learn to do, and the pride really takes a hit on this. If I can't remain detached with a sponsee, if every time the phone rings, um, your body tenses up when you see who it is. Um, if you keep getting into scraps with people, I've just learned to exit the relationship because I mean, I have a good go. I don't do this like the first time there's trouble, but if over a period of months, I can't remain detached. This is not the relationship in which I'm going to learn detachment in sponsorship. I'm going to need to know when you're in out of your depth. Practice detachment with someone where it's a bit easier and come back to the trickier cases later. Because if I don't remain detached, the psychic game that I get into with the other person keeps them blocked and keeps me blocked. And I've exited certain relationships and energy floods into my life and I see what happens to the other person. They also make massive progress. So I've learned to detach. Similarly, if a sponsee can't detach, so if they have an excessively positive attachment to you as a sponsor or an excessively negative attachment to you as a sponsor, again, just cut that little cord. Um, um, what else? Something my sponsor said many, many years ago, and it sunk in after a while. Uh, if you have people in AA that show a lot of gratitude towards you, don't personalize it. They're grateful for what they've received, and there's a danger there of thinking that you formed a special bond with someone in AA. They're just grateful for what they've received, and that's good. That's not a bad thing, but it's not personal. And the danger is personalizing. I've seen that problem arise again and again and again as a problem in sponsor-sponsee relationships and other types of relationship in AA. Practically, if someone thanks you, what I've been told to do, accept the thanks with grace, uh, kind of point out the higher power behind the whole thing, but pass it up the line to God. Don't hold on to the gratitude, pass it up to God. Um, What else? So in group consciences, practicing tradition 12 in group consciences, what I've been taught to do is to listen to the content, not the form, and listen to the principle that's being expressed, not the personality that's expressing it, and ask whether that principle serves God's purpose. I have a habit of agreeing with people I find charismatic and not agreeing with people that I find repugnant in some way because of like a personal thing. And I've had to learn to gradually to look past that. And it's the same when listening to AA speakers. Sometimes I'm a bit hesitant about great big AA jamborees. Um, they do lots of good, but I used to go to, I'm not going to say which one. I used to go to one every year in America, which was great. I mean, I'm not knocking it, but honestly, I think I was going for the feeling I was getting out of listening to the speakers because honestly, the speakers were really charismatic. I wasn't really listening to the principle. What principles can I learn from this? What can I actually get out? What can I get out of this that I can use in my life? I was inspired, but the trouble is with inspiration without information, it's going to wear off and you haven't got nothing concrete at the end of it. And the last time I went with a different attitude. I said, what can I learn from this? Like beyond the inspiration, beyond the charisma, beyond the personalities, and the personalities were big personalities. Beyond those, is there anything I can take from it? And I enjoyed it, but I realized I don't want to go back. This is a really expensive trip. I'm going a long way to get basically spiritually titillated. I'm not taking anything from this that I can actually use. And the next week I was at my home group and I was listening to everyone share and I was thinking the content here is so useful. And I was actually getting at my home group 10 times more in terms of actual content than I was getting from flying halfway around the world. Um, in relationships, to give up personal ambition and instead to serve the other person, and to treat forgiveness as a form of service. I've talked about this with the other traditions. Um, it talks in Dennis F's readings about serving anonymously, and it's in the 12 and 12, not the 12 and 12, the Just for Today card. That slightly Stepford Wivesy thing we got from Al-Anon. I actually love it, but it is kind of, don't show them that you were hurt. I mean, by FYI, the reason why it says that is because I have as Karen says, an Al-Anon stripe down my back. I would use showing other people that I was hurt to get them to change their behavior because I was really good at showing people I was hurt in a way which made them feel guilty, and they would then try to get rid of the guilt by working out how they needed to change for me not to express my dissatisfaction through the sighing and the eye rolling and all of the other stuff. So that's where that comes from. Don't show them that you're hurt. It's not, don't tell people legitimately when you're upset or make requests or whatever, but don't misuse it as a tool of manipulation. But Just for Today card. Oh yes, it says in there to try to help someone without letting them know. And of course, this has given rise to, a whole sort of culture in AA of doing spooky things to help people. And then they spend the next month thinking they've got some weird stalker who, because they can't work out who washed their car or whatever. And I mean, there are obviously opportunities for doing things, go to the local park at 6 in the morning and pick up the litter or whatever. But I think you can apply it just much more simply. Just do stuff for other people without seeking praise for it. Have you ever cooked the dinner and your other half or whoever else you're cooking dinner for just is kind of eating it with their mouth half open, watching television and checking their phone every 15 seconds? And they haven't expressed any gratitude or praise. And you're like, how's your dinner? And I don't want to know what I'm really saying is praise me, pat me on the head. Have you ever done the dishes and then done a ta-da? Look how lovely the kitchen looks now. I've cleaned the kitchen. No, just do it and stop looking for praise and admiration and all of those other things. I'm not 7. Like if I want to pray, if I want to ask my higher power, if I want to pat on the head. And the other thing about anonymity, I think there is a sense of modesty and not pushing yourself forward too much. Someone said to me once about a discussion. If you're at dinner with a bunch of people, it would be rude to if there were 5 people to eat half of the food. You're supposed to have 1/5 of the food. And it's the same with conversation. If there are 5 people at the table, why are you talking 50% of the time? I know I'm talking 100% of the time this morning, but that's a different context. I was asked to. But the slogans I apply to practice that in social situations and in group consciences and so on is the Al-Anon slogan, wait, why am I talking? And then about 5 minutes later, waste, why am I still talking? The first one doesn't get you, the second one will. Uh, in the relationship with God, how do I apply tradition 12? Uh, is to try to do the next right thing just for its own sake, not because of anything I'm going to get back from it. And the master at doing that is if you grab a copy of Practicing the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence, it can be downloaded for free from various websites, but honestly, do yourself a favor, get one of the decent translations, on Amazon or whatever. You can usually do the look inside thing to see whether it was written in 17th century French. I don't recommend trying it in 17th century French. I've tried, it's tough. So get a translation. Lots of the free translations are those 19th century translations which don't really work, which are just very, very literal. So do yourself a favor, get a decent translation of it. It will really help. Practicing the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence is absolutely the essence of anonymity. There are no questions, so Gabrielle, I'm going to stop there if I may.